Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just 12.1, the roadmap to be provided for the committee about the wetlands, and it was supposed to be on the 2nd of the 9th.
Through the chair, we gave an update on that at the last meeting.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, okay, cool.
Thank you. Just on 10.2, prepare a report to council if necessary, underway awaiting legal advice. Could you just talk to that a little bit more? What exactly is underway? Is it the report itself, which means it's at the next meeting, or is it, yeah, kind of where are we at with that?
Through the chair, we are working with the regulatory team around where we sit with that and the reply that we have given to them, which we will then potentially report back to if we need to council.
All right, thank you.
Get some clarity on that point. So as the regulatory team, should they not be providing us with independent advice?
Through the chair, the regulatory will report, they don't report back to committees on their actions that they take. They'll report back once they have taken them. So they'll provide their advice to the chief executive. So it's an operational. If anything further comes out of it, then that will be reported to committees, but that part of it stays in the operational side.
Sure, I'm happy with that. So I'm not sure I'm happy with that.
So to clarify through the chair, the regulatory arm doesn't report its findings to WMC. It goes through a different committee. So it's the regulatory side of council. They'll tell you their report on once they've concluded it, but they don't talk about their stuff to committees or public while it's still ongoing. But if you want to report on their side of it when it's finished, that's fine. But it's while it's ongoing, it's between staff.
I would have expected the regulatory arm to be proactive in providing us with some advice on what we should be doing. If I'm mistaken, fine. But this legal advice seems to be taking an awful long time.
Through the chair, I'm happy to talk about it in public excluded. Through the chair, we're going to public excluded at the end of the agenda to have a public excluded discussion. Then I'm happy to discuss it then. So through the chair, the Tangata Whenua reference group is something that's come out of the consenting process for the wastewater overflows, dry and wet weather events. It's something that the commissioners have asked for us to include going forward in our resource consent, and it's around reviewing the progress of the DrainWise implementation, but then also the performance of how we're looking after the maintenance network and things that are there. During the hearing, we discussed with the commissioners the fact that we have a wastewater management committee that already oversees the wastewater treatment plant, the consent for the treatment plant, which also does include the pipes that service the service the wastewater treatment plant as well. They didn't want to put the WMC into the resource consent, but it was around the WMC approving who the members were of that, because they were recognizing that the WMC already has a function that's here. And as you can see in the consent, we had to bring it to you very quickly. So we had to bring it within 2 months, which is why we've brought it onto the agenda for this, to then be able to bring a process, if you're comfortable, to the March meeting for you to then appoint who you would like as your tangata whenua reference group to oversee the ongoing operation of that consent and the delivery of it too. So this is around, and a lot of it's on page 12 of your agenda there, around what it oversees and does. But it's around the WMC. Are you comfortable with us bringing a report back in March? We'll talk to Kiwa in the interim as well. And then we would bring for you to then decide who to appoint to that tangata whenua reference group going forward. Happy to take questions on it.
I'm happy to move the report. I think it's a good idea. And has there been any conversation with the Kiwa group as yet, or is that still coming?
Through the chair, we haven't met with the Kiwa group. In the interim, from having the commissioner's decision and having this meeting, we haven't met with them yet. We have a meeting coming up with the Kiwa group, but that's our regular meeting.
Chair, does merely putting it on our agenda meet your requirements from the commissioners?
So we had to have brought it to you within 2 months of decision, which is the important part. The bit that for us is to be able to have time to be able to bring you a process and recommendations to appoint to that group. But we wanted to make sure that it came on this agenda to meet the requirement for them, but it's around having time to then come back to you with recommendations, but would also seek guidance around membership or how we do that as well.
No, thank you. Yeah, I support that, and yeah, very happy to support that for March.
Just highlight that in the summary, it talks about 21st of October 2022, and I think that should be 2021. And just the fact that the tangata whenua reference group's terms of reference are not, as they appear in that particular report, are not what their actual terms of reference are. That's the Wastewater Management Committee's terms of reference. Just so that that's clear for anyone else who might be listening. And just, I guess, having read through the consent itself, there seems to be some pretty strong parallels between what's going to be asked of this group and what we currently get from Kiwa. And do we have the consent also, to a certain extent, seems concerned with the fact that do we have another group of Kiwa experts in our community? Is that something that report will be able to address, that you bring back to us?
Through the chair, the commissioners did comment around the number of groups regarding wastewater and whether or not there was a need for another group, or whether or not there was something that could be the WMC and Kiwa agreeing how the monitoring of the drainwise, so it's okay, I'll just call it the drainwise consent, how that is best managed given the resources that takes up of everybody. So it's something that we've brought to the committee. We're happy to come back. I'd like to have further conversations, particularly with our iwi representatives around what it looks like, talk to Kiwa, and then bring a recommendation back in that March paper is what we would like to be able to do.
Yes, I agree. It needs to come back, and this is the first introduction to us as WMC. But going back to drainwise, yeah, I was skeptical why Judy never walked into the room with the drains for us in the old days, and so this going through this commissioner's report kind of linked for me where the two came together. So I'm strongly in favour of a separate group. We saw some specific submitters, better reflect them in this group, and it is particular to the drains. And, And I think that group is most probably independent of Kiwa, which is a more operational group. It's most probably the one that wants to get its hands dirty on some aspects. And then I think as far as the commissioners are concerned, there should be another group that's reported back to on a regular basis. And that's where I think I look forward to this coming forward to us in March. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, my main concerns around this were the addition of an extra group, but more in the fact that the work program, the annual work program isn't enormous, and it is taxing to add another governance layer to a work program that probably needs to be condensed to see the value of that governance layer. If we can potentially bring some spending forward and make those improvements quick, to add to see the value of that governance group instead of dragging it out.
Apologies for a number of staff who aren't here today. We're at a final stage with McConnell Dow when it comes to the contract. So a lot of the staff are busy finalising some of the details that are going into that today. So apologies from John and Neville. Plant seems to be going pretty, so it's not seems, it is going pretty well. We have a massive concrete pour that's happening down there this morning. It started at 3 a.m. this morning. There's 25 concrete trucks worth of concrete being poured into the clarifier pump station. So it's the hole that's 8 meters in the ground is going to be pretty full of concrete by this afternoon. So team have done a huge job on that. They've also been underway with the ground improvements that are happening on the Bank Street proper site where we will be installing the clarifiers and everything. That's been going really well. We're really pleased with the soil conditions that we've been able to hit there. We've also been able to get quite good compactions that we were after. Also being able to move material from the Bank Street wastewater treatment plant build to the Kiwa Pills build has been a huge help for us, not just in cost, but also in time. Being able to run trucks between the two sites means we don't have very much downtime. So it's been quite efficient being able to get things backwards and forwards from there. You can see the photos and things on page 20. That clarifier pump station at the bottom of page 20, that's the one that's being filled up as we sit here today. So really pleased with progress on site in the plant and stuff. Yep. 20, that's the one that's being filled up as we sit here today. So really pleased with progress on site in the plant and stuff. Yep. 20, that's the one that's being filled up as we sit here today. So really pleased with progress. So this here's the ground stabilization process. So the excavator, you can see there, has got the vibrating head on it that goes down. It also injects the concrete that they batch on site. That's the one that's being filled up as we sit here today. It creates the concrete. Really pleased with progress. So this here's the ground stabilization process. So the excavator, you can see there, has got the vibrating head on it that goes down. Compaction by the vibration of concrete that they batch on site. Stabilization, so as it goes down through, it creates really pleased with progress. So this here's the ground stabilization process. So the have a lot. You can see there has got a vibrating head on it that goes down. Compaction by the vibration of concrete that they batch on stabilization. So as it goes down through, it creates really pleased with progress. So this here's the ground stabilization process. So the have a lot. So that as I said, the groundwork's really well. They've got started the concrete. So plan is stabilization. It creates really pleased with progress. So this here's the ground stabilization process. So the have a lot. So that as I said, the groundwork's really well. They've got started the concrete. So plan is stabilization. It creates really pleased with progress. So this here's the ground stabilization process. So the have a lot. So that as I said, the groundwork's really well. They've got started the concrete. So plan is stabilization. So this here's the ground. So that is, as I said, the groundwork's running really well. So this here's the ground. So that, as I said, the groundwork's running really well. So this here's the ground. So that, as I said, the groundwork's running really well. So this here's the ground. So that, as I said, the groundwork's running really well. So this here's the ground. So that, as I said, the groundwork's running.
Yeah, Dave, how deep is that down where all that concrete's going?
I think we went down, it's 8 meters and then another 2 past that, so I think it's 10.
Wow.
Yeah, we're pretty deep,
Deep?
down in there. That is how we have to The only thing that we have hit was some very, very old tortora that was down there, but it was completely decomposed when we pulled it out. So it was, as soon as you touched it, it fell apart. But there was something down it. I think it was about 6 meters.
Just on page 19, I know a lot of our stuff has arrived, but just to the point around escalation in steel prices, you'll note that it's probably one thing that I constantly ask you about, is how much of what we have left to procure is vulnerable to those escalating prices.
So we're at the final stage of locking in a price with McConnell Dowell at the moment. That includes the current prices. That is valid for a time period. After that, we would be open to escalations if we don't sign within a certain time frame. Pretty confident that that has been mitigated. With the steel market, we have bought the bulk of the steel that we need for the structure. The steel that we have remaining left to buy is stainless steel, which is used for piping, which we're looking to purchase as soon as we have completed the negotiations with McConnell Dowell. We'll purchase it straight away to try and make sure we don't get any more price increases.
Still comfortable within our contingencies at the moment.
Through the chair, we are within budgets with how we're processing at this stage. We still have a healthy contingency at this stage as well. So through the chair, the biggest thing to update here is around the mortuary waste for the disposal at Tarihiru Cemetery. So that has been going ahead since the bylaw has been put in. So the resource consent and then also looking at the siting within Tarihiru. So we have a meeting with Kiwa to discuss whereabouts within Tarihiru Cemetery we will be putting that. We have a contractor who will be able to start that process for us in the new year. So we're pretty happy with that, but it's just getting the resource consent lodged and then being able to move forward with the mortuary waste is the big thing for us. We are still waiting to see what happens with Hawthorne with the project planning for AUD. And we're just, as you can see from the timeframe, so we're still waiting for the outcomes on where that's going to be. Hopefully finding out by February how that's going.
Probably a little bit in line with some of our conversations in the last meeting. Since the last meeting, we essentially have a deadline now as to when this committee becomes obsolete with the 3 water reforms, or not necessarily obsolete, but it won't exist as it exists now. Yes. And given that we currently, as I understand it, don't have enough commitment from council to AUD in an operational sense to ensure that the new entities pick it up and do something with it. So just to the point that Shannon raised last time, and I'm not sure, I'd be interested in other people's thoughts around, maybe we don't have funding allocated, but we need to get commitments in place that oblige the new entities to progress this work. I think that becomes one of our most urgent focuses in light of what we know the government has said must happen. I've also got a couple of points on page 26, but I'd like to cover this off first if there's some discussion on that.
Sorry, Kerry, yours was a general one, but tied to alternate use and disposal, AUD.
Investigations over the LTP, but they're only investigations.
Yep.
They're not, it doesn't say yet we will begin with XYZ, because this is literally that you need to pick up and roll into whatever it does. So they will pick up investigating. No commitment to that.
Sorry, yeah, and Kerry has said we'll talk about that again later. The one I wanted to pick up on was just that the Cawthron and the Endeavour Fund is a bit of hard work. Quite a bit of expectation out there about how we respond to her questions and things. And that's once again what Shannon is saying about duplications and complications of tangata whenua working with another body. I just mentioned that in passing, that she definitely needs a lot of help, and it gets down to 2 or 3 to help steer Cawthrons. And it needs significant advancement to perhaps get to a level that I think you're asking of it. It's a lot of work. Yes, from what I'm seeing at the introductory level, it really is an introductory level, and I can't afford my people to spend their time doing standing by a stream. And we've done enough standing by the streams. Yep. But there is a little bit of flattening out, talking about everything in New Zealand, all Māori everywhere, instead of yep. That's all the hesitation I have about that fund delivering anything in Cawthron as well.
Through the chair, we've shared that feedback with Cawthron as well, that this is something we selfishly care about tairāwhiti and what we're doing, and it has to be something that's going to be tangible from it. It's the duplication across the country is nice for their part of it, but as you say, if we need to be moving forward, it's not another way of taking time to look at again. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, from my point of view, I would be dragging everything forward in the budget and debt funding it, and moving all these significant issues on.
To Shannon's point, there is a budget in the LTP, which really the important piece, even just to Penny's point around the fact that it's not properly resourced at the moment to deliver even the potential to actually accelerate I can't even say it, Cawthron, potential opportunity, that if this continues to just languish, they will just pick up a project that's not even begun. And that's a massive lost opportunity. And it's beholden on us, really. This is our window. How motivated are we? And especially when we know in our mind, I think it's worth being mindful. I know this is a wastewater management committee, but water's not, waters connect with other waters. This has the potential to alleviate a lot of stress that's in other why. So our action sheet doesn't currently speak to this at all. I think we need something on that action sheet that does take this seriously. At the moment, we don't meet often enough for this to deliver anything if at every meeting we just say, yes, it needs to be more urgent, and then we just say the same thing at the next meeting.
Thank you. And this may not be a question that Dave's the right person to answer, but with the significant investment from government in our wastewater treatment project, it does leave us a significant amount of debt headroom in the near term that was due to be used for the wastewater treatment plant. I think there's 11 million put into that, wasn't there?
So through the chair, just to clarify, there are a couple of things that you're discussing here. So with Three Waters, we don't have any further guidance, unfortunately, than the announcements that came out that were Three Waters is going ahead. We have no idea about any sort of transition, any type of requirements that we put into the water services entities around how they will have to pick up the obligations from councils or from consent holders. So that's all the information that we're waiting for. As a lot of you will know around the table, the governance discussion is very much a live topic that is not settled around how they will be governed and how in particular iwi will be moving forward with whatever the water services entities look like. When it comes to the funding that you're referring to, Councillor Dowsing, the $7 million was, so we had $11.03 million that was given by the government for the Three Waters. We put $2.5 million into the water supply to Muriwai. There was then another 700,000 set aside for Ruatoria for them to have a community water supply installed there. The remaining $7 million was put towards the wastewater treatment plant. However, that was not to offset debt. That was in order to be able to do the plant upgrades, given the cost increases and things that we've been having, to be able to do the technology as we had hoped to. So there wasn't a lowering of debt level. Council's debt level is still set, and I'm sure Pauline's going to cringe because I'm explaining finances. By years 2 and 3 of this LTP, we get very, very high up to the debt ceiling that is imposed under the LTP. So it's unlikely for us to be able to take on significant more debt without a revisitation of your finance policy. So we can't front load debt. The other thing I would say is central government are very much watching councils to make sure that they don't front load a whole lot of debt and then transfer it over to the
I'm not
water
suggesting front loading debt for the purchase of a wetland or something of that significant nature. I'm talking about front loading debt on the $750,000 of money required to kickstart this project. If we're underfunding our development of a strategy, and we're underfunding our, well, essentially not underfunding, but the funding available in the near term is too low to even get our relationships in order and get our first set of external funding in. So it seems that there is a need to bring some of that forward. It's not the sort of level of debt that I would think is going to be the straw that broke the camel's back, if you like. But yeah, that's my opinion, is that if we need to bring some of that forward, then it's a real discussion and something that we should have the opportunity to do.
I think as Dave is saying, it's a new ball game, and I'm hoping that you fellas are closer to what will eventually take place than we are. Well, okay, so from my seat, it is a mixture of transitions. The stuff that's closer to regulations will last longer where it lies, and anything that got iwi against it will last longer than where it lies as well. So if we were real critical and falling over like Manala says, those are the places where they'll head to. So I mean, I'll be upfront as iwi. I'm happy with Three Rivers, with the strategies, but I'll also be upfront. The only way I can battle is having council as a good partner as well. I think we can still be two players in the room. It's just we're in a different arena, a bigger arena. As iwi, I'll try and battle with all the iwi groups between here and Nelson. And as councillors, yeah, you'll try and take apart the Wellingtons on my behalf. And you'll find other councils to work in alignment as well. So, yes, it's all happy days. Changes galore.
Just have another comment. It's not related to that issue. Just with regards to the table that talks to climate change. I'm not sure who put it together, but it seems a little bit backwards. Wetlands actually emit methane, and if you're applying your water to crops, then actually you're going to be sequestering carbon. So those increases and decreases are back to front, but all good.
Second, Terry, as favour. Aye. The wastewater overflow consent.
Oh, sorry, in your report first. In your report.
Yeah, no, oh, okay, sorry, yeah, that was what I did ask.
Oh, sorry.
Annual report.
Page 29. I'll take the report as read. Tracy's here if you've got any questions around how the plant's been operating or anything that's been happening down there at Back Street. So is there anything you want to add, Trace?
Thank you. Just seeing what happened was at Christchurch as an emerging risk is the fire and the BTFs.
Yes.
Do we understand what happened in that situation, and is it a risk in our site?
Trace.
So Christchurch was quite interesting in that it looked like people had undertaken hot work on the framework of the fiberglass roof in it. And so what's happened is basically sparks got in, hit plastic media. Once you get burning plastic going, away it goes. So we've got a metal roof, so slightly a bit different, and we run a permit to work process. So we make sure that anybody on site is really aware. We talk through processes first. The fact that ours is stainless steel is a little bit better because it's probably a bit better as a fire retardant. The other part is that we don't have another joined BTF to it as well. So there's no way that you can catch other parts of the plant on fire. So that is one good thing. As far as risk goes, it's a fairly wet environment in there. And yeah, you'd have to have somebody doing something they're not meant to do. So our operational procedures basically stop that from happening.
So there's no definitive cause to their fire yet that we've heard. We're speculating that someone was welding something in the plant or something along those lines, but we don't know the actual cause from a report yet.
No, there's been no sort of official report that came out. All that we've heard so far is sort of the unofficial gossip headline, which is sort of goes through plants and sort of people know people who know people. But yeah, it does sound like it was just some hot work done in a place that wasn't meant to, in a because inside the BTF is quite a gaseous environment if you've not got extraction on it. So by the time you get into there, you can actually end up with explosions happening, and that would kick off any kind of good fire. Yeah.
Page 30, the Tikaraka wastewater upgrades. My question was just around the area of land available next to the current oxidation ponds. Is that sufficient to accommodate a wetland given the size of the pond in that diagram?
So through the chair, we did a number of work out at Tikaraka a couple of years ago around the sizing. So we're pretty confident that the size land that we've got there should be fine. It's only a small wet that we'll be putting in. It's quite a low flow that comes out of Tikaraka.
Thank you.
Just around climate change, is that significantly elevated that site to be outside of floodplain?
Through the chair, the treatment plant's outside of most of the events, but as we know, it's never outside any event. So yeah, but it is outside the usual floodplains where it is now.
Question, yeah, thanks. Just with the wetland for the Tikaraka wastewater, is there any use of the water or any idea of what the water will be used after it comes through the wetland?
Irrigation.
Irrigation.
It's going straight back into the river.
So through the chair, it's a polishing wetland before it goes off. It's not like the full scale models that you've seen developed up for the city,
Yeah.
but this is very much to remove nutrients and remove things out of the water before it goes into the Waipawa River.
Mr. Chair, might be for you, Tracy. So in terms of the monitoring processes, I know there was one period we were non-compliant. Were there any other issues that we should be aware of?
The area of non-compliance is actually just that it was technical non-compliance. So basically, there's sort of 3 areas that we're technically non-compliant at the moment. One is because the plant's not built. The second one was that during the COVID lockdowns, the laboratory up in Auckland couldn't take our tests. They just didn't have enough staff on board with the amount of social distancing they needed to do. So it was something we discussed with the regulatory section and said, look, what do we do? And so they were happy that we just didn't sample during that time. The rest of the plant during that time, basically, we didn't see any issues. We were keeping an eye on it. We took daily samples just to have a look at what it looked like. And so we've done that for a couple of years now, and nothing looked different from normal. So I doubt that even if we had been sampling, we would have had any issues there. Yeah.
So through you, Chair, this is just the report to update you on the consent for the waste. So the wet weather and dry weather overflows and the conditions that we be working to. As the report, your first report you had around the tangata whenua reference group, this is also the other conditions that we have to comply with. There will be a report to the committee that will upcome around what this means to us from an operational point of view. So the consent will require us to put more effort in with DrainWise. There is requirements for us to speed up some of the work that we've been doing to make sure that we show tangible process. So there is going to be a report to this committee and to council around the extra requirements that this consent has placed on us from an operational point of view, and then how we will respond to those with more resource to make sure we show the progress across the network. Happy to take any questions.
I'm just going to say that it was an enjoyable report to read, very thorough around the submissions made, and yeah, gave a great deal of background to the decision. It was good. Thank you.